It's your wedding day. You are standing in front of the person you are about to marry for the rest of your life. And you have never spoken to them before today. 2 words. Not love. Your father and her father have spent the last 3 weeks arguing, not about whether you two get along, but about goats. How many? Which field comes with her? Whose grandchildren get the Goodwill? You are not really the one getting married today. Your two families are. You've met her twice. Both times her father did the talking. Here's the question that should bother you. Why did marriage ever start like this? Every other pair-bonding animal on Earth picks a partner for one reason: the partner itself. A swan doesn't ask its mate's father for land. Direct. No families involved. No negotiation. You did something stranger. You turned a private choice into a public contract between groups of people who had never met each other before that morning. And it might be the single strangest deal your species ever struck. So here's what you probably have backwards about marriage. It was never really built for love. It was built as a machine for turning strangers into family. On purpose, by force, whether the two people getting married liked each other or not. Let's go find out who that machine actually served. Picture two small bands thousands of years ago camped a half-day's walk apart. They don't trust each other. They compete for the same water, the same herds, one bad season, and they could be enemies. So who kept the peace? Not a treaty. A daughter. Hand a woman from your camp to a man in theirs, and something changes overnight. His children are now your grandchildren. His hunting grounds are now family land. You didn't just gain an ally, you gained a relative, and relatives don't raid each other's camps. It's such a reliable trick that anthropologists call it exogamy, marrying out of your own group on purpose, and it shows up independently again and again in societies that never had any contact with each other at all. Anthropologists have a blunt name for this: marriage as alliance. And here's the detail that should catch you off guard. The couple's feelings were often the last thing anyone asked about. So who was this marriage actually for? Not the bride, not the groom. It was for the two camps standing behind them, and notice how the payment usually flowed. In many of these societies, the groom's family paid the bride's family cattle, tools, land. Not because a daughter was being bought like livestock, exactly, but because her family was losing a working pair of hands, and someone had to make that loss worth it. Flip the economy, and the payment flips too. In societies where a bride joined a wealthy household, her family sometimes paid a dowry going the other way. Same machine, different direction of the money. Now, push that forward a few thousand years into a farming village with something new to fight over: land that doesn't move, and grain that can be stolen. And here the plot thickens. A father with 3 daughters and 1 son has a problem. Split the land 4 ways, and in 2 generations there's nothing left to split. Marry the daughters out to other families, and the land stays whole. So who is this marriage actually for? The land. Suddenly a wedding wasn't a romance. It was an inheritance plan wearing a wedding dress. Now here's a number that should surprise you. Across documented human societies, roughly 80% historically allowed a man to have more than 1 wife at the same time. Strict, one-partner-only marriage, the version you probably assume is traditional, was actually the minority arrangement for most of human history. Why? Because in most farming and herding societies, more wives meant more hands in the field, more children, more alliances stitched to more families at once. A second marriage wasn't usually about romance either. It was expansion. And notice what's still missing from this whole story. Nobody has asked yet whether the bride and groom even liked each other. Fast forward again, into kingdoms. And here the stakes get almost absurd. A king doesn't marry a princess from the next kingdom over because he's charmed by her. He marries her because the alternative to that marriage is often a war. So who was this marriage actually for? An entire country. One wedding night could prevent a decade of dead soldiers. Royal marriage wasn't a love story. It was a peace treaty with a ring. Look at nearly any royal family tree from medieval Europe, and you'll see the same names married across enemy borders, generation after generation, until half of Europe's rulers were each other's cousins. That wasn't an accident, and it definitely wasn't romance. It was foreign policy, running quietly through the bedroom instead of the battlefield. Cleopatra herself married 2 of her own brothers back to back for exactly this reason. Not out of desire, but because Egyptian royal succession ran through marriage, and a throne without the right marriage attached to it wasn't secure at all. And that's the reversal that should genuinely unsettle you. We treat marrying for love as the deep, ancient, natural version of marriage, and everything else, arranged matches, political unions, marriages for land, as some corrupted modern distortion of the real thing. It's exactly backwards. For most of human history, marrying for love was considered reckless. Two people choosing each other for feelings alone, with no families checked, no land secured, no peace guaranteed. That wasn't romantic. That was dangerous. Historians who study this call it, almost mockingly, the radical idea, because for centuries, it genuinely was. Parents who let a child marry purely for feelings were sometimes seen as neglecting their duty, not honoring their child's happiness. Now, the honest complication, because I've made this sound too tidy, alliance and property explain a huge amount of marriage's history, but they don't explain all of it. There's a real competing case from evolutionary biologists that long-term pair bonding also has a much older, more personal root. A father sticking around to help raise a child who cannot survive its first years alone. That instinct may be genuinely ancient, too, tangled up underneath all the politics and property law layered on top of it later. The honest answer is probably both. A very old bond between two people, wrapped for most of history in a much colder contract between two families. Which theory wins probably depends on which society and which century you're standing in. But strip away exactly which came first, and one thing survives either version. For almost all of human history, marriage was never primarily about the two people standing at the altar. It was infrastructure. It moved land, sealed peace, multiplied labor, and only very recently, a few hundred years at most, did anyone put love anywhere near the center of it. So think about that wedding day again. Two people, two families standing behind them, checking the land, counting the goats, calculating the peace it might buy. What almost nobody in that scene was checking was whether the two people getting married actually wanted each other. That changed. Slowly, stubbornly, over the last few centuries, love climbed from being an accident of marriage to being the entire point of it. And it is still, historically speaking, an experiment we've barely started running. Most of the marriages that have ever existed on this planet were never asked to survive on love alone. Yours might be one of the first. So tell me, if you'd been born 1,000 years ago in almost any place on Earth, with your marriage already decided by your parents for land, peace, or family, would you have fought that decision or made peace with it, the way almost everyone before you did? Be honest. I read every single one. And if the quiet machinery still humming underneath your most personal choices, who you love, who you marry, who you build a life with, is the kind of thing that keeps you turning ideas over at night, then subscribe and stick around. Because somewhere between a father trading goats for peace and a couple choosing each other for no reason but love, we ran one of the strangest experiments our species has ever tried. And most of us are living inside it without ever once stopping to notice.